The U.S. government is facing a looming deadline to raise or suspend the debt ceiling, which is a limit set by Congress on how much money the Treasury can borrow to fund its operations and pay its bills. If the debt ceiling is not raised by October 18, the Treasury could run out of cash and default on its obligations, triggering a financial crisis that could have global repercussions. But raising the debt ceiling is not a simple matter of passing a bill in Congress. It requires bipartisan cooperation and compromise, which are in short supply in Washington, D.C. these days. The recent political turmoil in the Capitol has increased the risk of a default or a shutdown if the debt ceiling is not raised in time. One of the main sources of conflict is the disagreement over how to pay for President Joe Biden's ambitious spending plans, which include a $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief package, a $2.3 trillion infrastructure proposal and a $1.8 trillion social welfare plan. Republicans oppose these plans and demand spending cuts and work requirements for some benefit programs for low-income Americans in exchange for their votes to raise the debt limit. Democrats, on the other hand, want to pass these plans through a process called reconciliation, which allows them to bypass Republican opposition in the Senate with a simple majority vote. But reconciliation also requires them to agree on a budget resolution that sets the spending and revenue levels for the next decade. This has proven difficult, as some moderate Democrats have expressed concerns about the size and scope of Biden's plans and their impact on inflation and debt. Another source of tension is the power struggle between the two parties in Congress, especially in the House of Representatives, where Democrats have a slim majority of 222 to 213. The House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has been facing pressure from his conservative wing, especially the hardline House Freedom Caucus, to block any debt ceiling deal that does not include robust spending cuts. McCarthy has also been accused of undermining democracy by supporting former President Donald Trump's false claims of election fraud and opposing an independent commission to investigate the January 6 attack on the Capitol by Trump supporters. Meanwhile, Democrats have been frustrated by what they see as Republican obstructionism and hypocrisy on the debt ceiling issue. They argue that Republicans are playing politics with the nation's creditworthiness and endangering the economy by refusing to raise the debt limit that they themselves helped create by approving tax cuts and spending increases under Trump. They also point out that raising the debt ceiling does not authorize new spending, but only allows the government to pay for what it has already spent. Despite these challenges, there have been some signs of progress and optimism in recent days. Biden and McCarthy have met several times at the White House and have voiced confidence that they can reach a deal before the deadline. They have also delegated their top aides to work out the details of a possible agreement that could include spending caps, new work requirements for some benefit programs and changes to energy permitting. But time is running out and many hurdles remain. Even if Biden and McCarthy strike a deal, they will still need to sell it to their respective parties and get it passed by both chambers of Congress. And even if they manage to do that, they will only be kicking the can down the road, as any deal is likely to be temporary and require another round of negotiations in the near future. The stakes are high and the consequences are dire. The U.S. has never defaulted on its debt before, and doing so could have catastrophic effects on its economy and its reputation as a global leader. The last time the U.S. came close to defaulting was in 2011, when a similar standoff over the debt ceiling led to a downgrade of its credit rating and a stock market plunge. The U.S. cannot afford to repeat that mistake or worse. It needs to act quickly and responsibly to raise or suspend the debt ceiling and avoid a default or a shutdown that could derail its recovery from the pandemic and undermine its stability and security. The U.S. government is facing a looming deadline to raise or suspend its debt ceiling, which is the legal limit on how much money it can borrow to pay its bills. If Congress fails to act by June 1, the Treasury Department could run out of cash and default on its obligations for the first time in history. This would have serious and lasting consequences for the global markets, the U.S. dollar, and the American people. Debt default would trigger a financial crisis that could spread across the world. It would cause interest rates to spike, stock markets to plunge, and credit markets to freeze. It would also damage the reputation and credibility of the U.S. as the world's largest economy and reserve currency. The U.S. dollar could lose its status as the dominant global currency, making it harder and more expensive for the U.S. to borrow and trade. This would weaken the U.S. economy and reduce its global influence. Debt default would also hurt millions of Americans who rely on government payments and services. It would disrupt Social Security checks, veterans' benefits, Medicare reimbursements, food stamps, unemployment benefits, and tax refunds. It would also affect federal employees, contractors, and grant recipients who would face furloughs, layoffs, or delayed payments. Moreover, a U.S. debt default would increase the risk of a recession or a depression that could wipe out jobs, incomes, savings, and investments for many Americans. The only way to avoid these dire outcomes is for Congress to reach a bipartisan agreement on raising or suspending the debt ceiling before it's too late. However, this is easier said than done, as both parties have different demands and priorities for the budget and spending. Negotiations are ongoing between President Joe Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who have expressed some optimism about finding a solution. But they also face opposition from hardline factions within their own parties who could try to block or delay a deal. The stakes are high for both sides, as well as for the rest of the world. Debt ceiling deal could avert a disaster and restore confidence in the U.S. economy and leadership. But a failure to reach a deal could derail the global recovery from the pandemic and plunge the world into chaos.